The morning fog was just beginning to lift from the Portland hills when Harold Whitmore stepped onto his front porch with his first cup of coffee of the day. At 80 years old, Harry still maintained the 6 a.m. routine he'd followed for 60 years. Up before dawn, coffee black and strong, 20 minutes on the porch watching his neighborhood wake up. His hands, gnarled from decades of carpentry work, wrapped around the ceramic mug his late wife Dorothy had given him for their 30th anniversary. The mug bore a faded inscription, "World's Best Dad," though Harry sometimes wondered if Dorothy would still agree with that sentiment if she were alive to see how things had turned out with their daughter Patricia. The house behind him, a 1950s craftsman bungalow he'd largely built himself, was modest but meticulously maintained. Every board, every fixture, every carefully chosen detail reflected 60 years of a working man's pride and Dorothy's gentle influence on their home. The garden Dorothy had loved still bloomed under Harry's careful tending, though his arthritic knees made the work harder each year. Today was his 80th birthday, though Harry felt little inclination to celebrate. Patricia had called the night before, her voice artificially bright with the tone she'd adopted since Dorothy's death 3 years ago, a mixture of forced cheerfulness and barely concealed impatience. "Happy early birthday, Dad. I'll be over around 10 tomorrow morning. I have a special surprise for you." Harry had learned to be wary of Patricia's surprises. Since becoming executor of Dorothy's estate and discovering the extent of Harry's assets, the house, his pension, the life insurance money, and the modest investment account Dorothy had built over the years, Patricia's visits had become more frequent and her suggestions more pointed. "You shouldn't be living alone at your age, Dad. This house is too much work for you to maintain. What if you fall and no one's there to help?" Harry understood his daughter's concerns, but he also understood what lay beneath them. Patricia had struggled financially since her divorce 5 years ago, raising 2 teenagers on a teacher's salary while her ex-husband dodged child support payments. Harry had helped when he could, quietly paying for his grandchildren's school clothes and summer camps. But Patricia's eyes had grown calculating when she'd learned the true value of his estate. At 9:30 a.m., Harry was in his workshop, the converted garage where he still took on occasional small projects to keep his hands busy, when he heard Patricia's silver Lexus pull into the driveway. The car was new, purchased with money Harry didn't think she had, which made him even more suspicious about today's surprise. Patricia emerged from the car carrying a manila folder and wearing what Harry recognized as her serious business outfit, navy blazer, pressed slacks, the kind of clothes she wore to parent-teacher conferences and bank meetings. Behind her stepped a woman Harry didn't recognize, middle-aged, professional-looking, carrying a leather briefcase. "Dad!" Patricia called out, her voice artificially bright. "Come inside! I have someone I want you to meet." Harry wiped his hands on his work apron and followed them into the house, noting how Patricia immediately took charge, directing the stranger to the living room and gesturing for Harry to sit in his own recliner. "Dad, this is Susan Mitchell from Sunset Manor," Patricia said, her tone suggesting this was wonderful news. "She's here to tell you about their wonderful facility." Harry remained standing, his carpenter's instincts telling him something was structurally unsound about this situation. "What kind of facility?" Susan Mitchell opened her briefcase with practiced efficiency. "Mr. Whitmore, Sunset Manor is one of Portland's premier assisted living communities. We provide comprehensive care for seniors who need support with daily activities while maintaining their independence and dignity." Harry looked at Patricia, understanding dawning like a cold sunrise. "You want to put me in a nursing home." "It's not a nursing home, Dad," Patricia said quickly. "It's assisted living. Beautiful apartments, meals provided, activities, medical care on site. You'd love it there." "I love it here," Harry said flatly. Susan Mitchell spread brochures across the coffee table. "Mr. Whitmore, I understand this feels overwhelming, but many of our residents tell us they wish they'd made the transition sooner. You'd have companionship, professional care, and your family would have peace of mind knowing you're safe." Harry studied the glossy photographs. Smiling elderly people playing cards, walking in manicured gardens, participating in arts and crafts activities. They all looked medicated and vacant to him, like actors in a commercial for something nobody really wanted. "What brought this on, Patricia?" Harry asked. His daughter's composure cracked slightly. "Dad, you're 80 years old, living alone. What if something happens? What if you fall or have a heart attack or forget to turn off the stove? My mind is sharp as it's ever been, and my body's not ready for the scrap heap yet." "Mrs. Patterson next door called me last week," Patricia said, gaining momentum. "She said she saw you on a ladder cleaning gutters. At your age, what if you'd fallen?" Harry remembered the incident. He'd been clearing leaves from his gutters, work he'd done every fall for 60 years. Mrs. Patterson, a busybody in her 70s who'd moved in 5 years ago, had apparently appointed herself his guardian. "I've been cleaning my own gutters since before you were born." Susan Mitchell leaned forward with practiced empathy. "Mr. Whitmore, independence is important to all of us. That's why Sunset Manor is designed to preserve as much independence as possible while providing necessary support." "What kind of support do you think I need?" Patricia pulled out her own folder. "Dad, I've been doing research. The statistics on elderly people living alone are frightening. Falls, medication errors, social isolation, cognitive decline. My cognition is fine." "Is it?" Patricia's voice sharpened. "You forgot Jenny's birthday last month." Harry stiffened. Jenny was his 15-year-old granddaughter, Patricia's younger child. He had forgotten her birthday, the first time in 15 years, but he'd made up for it with a generous check and a heartfelt apology. And that was one mistake. "It's a pattern, Dad. Forgetting appointments, misplacing things, that incident with the gas bill." The gas bill incident had been a clerical error by the utility company, but Harry had spent 2 frustrating days on the phone getting it resolved. Patricia had somehow learned about it and filed it away as evidence of his declining faculties. Susan Mitchell sensed the tension and intervened smoothly. "Perhaps we could tour the facility? See if it feels like a good fit?" "No," Harry said firmly. "I'm not touring anything. I'm not moving anywhere. This is my home." Patricia's mask of patient concern slipped completely. "Dad, be reasonable. This house is too much for you. The yard work, the maintenance, the isolation. I maintain this house just fine." "Do you? When's the last time you had the furnace serviced, or the roof inspected, or the electrical system checked?" Harry had done all of those things himself, as he'd been doing for 60 years, but Patricia's rapid-fire questions made him feel defensive, uncertain. "Dad," Patricia continued, her voice softening into what Harry recognized as her manipulation tone, "I know this is hard, but I love you too much to watch you struggle alone when there are people who could help you." "But what about my things, my workshop, Dorothy's garden?" "We'll sort through everything," Patricia said quickly. "Keep what's important, donate the rest. The house will sell quickly in this market. The property values in this neighborhood have skyrocketed." And there it was. Harry felt a cold clarity settle over him like morning fog lifting. This wasn't about his safety or well-being. This was about liquidating his assets while he was still alive to sign the papers. "I see," Harry said quietly. Susan Mitchell misread his tone as acceptance. "Would you like to look at the admission paperwork? We can start with a trial period, if that would make you more comfortable." She spread forms across the coffee table. Admission agreements, medical releases, financial authorizations. Harry saw Patricia's name listed as his responsible party and financial power of attorney. "I don't recall signing a power of attorney," Harry said. Patricia's face flushed. "Dad, We discussed this after Mom died. You were so overwhelmed with grief and paperwork. Harry remembered being overwhelmed, certainly. Dorothy had handled most of their financial affairs, and after her death, he'd been lost in a maze of insurance claims and estate procedures. Patricia had helped, guiding him through the paperwork with patient explanations about protecting his interests. But he didn't remember signing away his right to make his own decisions. "I'd like to see those documents," Harry said. "Dad, they're just legal protections, in case you become incapacitated." "I'm not incapacitated." Susan Mitchell cleared her throat diplomatically. "Perhaps this is a lot to process in one sitting. Why don't I leave the information, and you can think it over?" "There's nothing to think over," Patricia said sharply. "We've already put a deposit down." Harry felt the room tilt slightly. "You what?" "Dad, Sunset Manor has a waiting list. When a spot opened up, I had to act quickly or lose the opportunity. You put down a deposit on my behalf without asking me. I used my authority as your power of attorney to secure your best interests." Harry stood up slowly, his carpenter's brain assembling the structure of what was happening. Patricia had somehow gained legal control over his affairs, committed him to a nursing home, and was now presenting it as a done deal on his 80th birthday. "I think you both should leave," Harry said quietly. "Dad, please be reasonable. I said leave, now." Patricia's composure cracked completely. "Fine, but Dad, you can't live in denial forever. You're 80 years old. You need help whether you admit it or not. What I need is to be left alone in my own house." After they left, Harry sat in his recliner, staring at the brochures and forms scattered across his coffee table. The smiling faces of the Sunset Manor residents looked back at him like a preview of his future. Managed, supervised, diminished. He thought about Dorothy, about the life they'd built in this house. He thought about the workshop where he'd taught his grandson Tommy to use tools before Patricia had decided the boy was too young for dangerous activities. He thought about the garden where Dorothy's roses still bloomed, tended by his own hands. At noon, Harry made 2 phone calls. The first was to Robert Chen, the lawyer who'd handled Dorothy's estate. Robert was in his 50s, the son of Chinese immigrants, with a reputation for fierce advocacy for his clients. Harry had liked him immediately, a no-nonsense man who explained things clearly and never talked down to his clients. "Robert, it's Harry Whitmore. I need to see you today, if possible. It's urgent." The second call was to his grandson Tommy, now 23, and working as an electrician in Seattle. "Grandpa, happy birthday. How's the Big 80 treating you?" "Tommy, I need to ask you something. Have you talked to your mother lately about me?" "Yeah, she's been concerned. Keeps saying you shouldn't be living alone." "What do you think?" Tommy was quiet for a moment. "Grandpa, you taught me to rewire a lamp when I was 12, and you were in your 70s. Last time I visited, you were rebuilding Mrs. Patterson's front steps because she was complaining they were wobbly. You seem pretty capable to me. Your mother put me in a nursing home today." "She what?" "Or tried to. Had papers drawn up, made a deposit, brought a representative to the house. Apparently she has power of attorney over my affairs." Tommy's voice turned hard in a way that reminded Harry of his own protective instincts. "Grandpa, that doesn't sound right. Did you sign something giving her that authority?" "I honestly don't remember. After your grandmother died, there was so much paperwork." "Where are you now?" "Home. But I don't think I'll be for much longer if Patricia has her way. I'm coming down." "Tommy, you don't need to—" "Grandpa, you taught me that family protects family. I'm driving down tonight. Don't sign anything until I get there." At 2 p.m., Harry met Robert Chen at his downtown office. Robert listened without interruption as Harry explained the morning's events, occasionally making notes in his careful handwriting. "Harry, do you remember signing any power of attorney documents?" Patricia helped me with a lot of paperwork after Dorothy died. I was pretty lost, and she said she was helping protect my interests. Robert opened a file cabinet and pulled out Harry's estate documents. I have copies of everything we filed after Dorothy's death. Let me check what we have here. He spread the documents across his desk, scanning each one carefully. Harry, I don't see any power of attorney documents in your file. If Patricia has such authority, she got it somewhere else. What does that mean? It means she may have had you sign something without you fully understanding what it was. Or, Robert paused, choosing his words carefully, the documents might not be legitimate. Are you saying she forged my signature? I'm saying we need to see exactly what she's claiming gives her authority over your affairs. Robert made several phone calls while Harry waited, his mind racing through the implications. If Patricia had somehow gained illegal control over his finances, what else might she have done? Harry, Robert said after his final call, I've just spoken with Sunset Manor. They confirm that someone claiming to be your power of attorney put down a $5,000 deposit yesterday and signed preliminary admission papers. $5,000. The deposit alone. Their monthly fees are $400 to $200, plus additional charges for medical care and services. Harry did the math quickly. More than $50,000 a year, money that would rapidly deplete his savings and force the sale of his house. What are my options? Robert leaned back in his chair. First, we need to see the power of attorney documents Patricia is using. If they're fraudulent or were signed under duress, we can challenge them. Second, we need to protect your assets immediately. Freeze accounts, revoke any unauthorized access. And if the documents are legitimate, then we explore whether you were competent when you signed them and whether Patricia is acting in your best interests. Given today's events, I'd say there's a strong case that she's not. Harry felt a surge of hope mixed with anger. What do you need from me? I need you to be prepared for a fight. Patricia won't give up easily, especially if money is involved. Are you ready for that? Harry thought about his house, his independence, his right to live his final years on his own terms. He thought about Dorothy, who would have been furious at anyone trying to manipulate her husband. I've been ready for a fight my whole life, Harry said. I'm not stopping now. That evening, Harry sat on his front porch waiting for Tommy to arrive. The house felt different now, not like a burden to be shed, but like a fortress to be defended. Every board he'd nailed, every room he'd painted, every memory embedded in these walls was worth fighting for. Mrs. Patterson appeared at her fence, her face pinched with concern. Harold, I heard Patricia was here earlier. Is everything all right? Harry looked at his busybody neighbor, wondering how much of his current predicament was due to her helpful phone calls to his daughter. Everything's fine, Eleanor, he said evenly. Just family business. Well, I hope you're considering what's best for your safety. At our age, independence can be a dangerous luxury. At our age, Harry replied, independence is the only luxury that matters. When Tommy's pickup truck pulled into the driveway at 8 p.m., Harry felt a weight lift from his shoulders. His grandson emerged from the cab, tall, broad-shouldered, with calloused hands and an honest face that reminded Harry of himself at that age. Grandpa, Tommy said, embracing him tightly, how are you holding up? Better now that you're here. They sat on the porch as darkness fell over the neighborhood, Harry explaining the full scope of what had happened. Tommy listened with growing anger, occasionally interrupting with questions that showed he understood the serious implications. So basically, Mom's trying to steal your house and put you away so she can get her hands on your money. I don't think she sees it that way. I think she's convinced herself she's helping me. By forcing you into a nursing home against your will. Harry sighed. Your mother's had a hard time since the divorce. Money's been tight, and she's always worried about providing for you kids. That doesn't give her the right to rob you, Grandpa. They were interrupted by the sound of another car in the driveway. Patricia's Lexus pulled up behind Tommy's truck, and she emerged looking flustered and angry. "Tommy, what are you doing here?" "Hello, Mom. I came to celebrate Grandpa's birthday." Patricia's eyes darted between her father and son, clearly recognizing that the dynamics had shifted. "I thought you were working in Seattle." "I took time off." "Well, this is a family matter that doesn't concern you." Tommy stood up slowly, his impressive height giving him a psychological advantage. "My grandfather's welfare concerns me plenty." "Tommy, you don't understand the situation. Your grandfather needs professional care. He needs family who respect his choices." Patricia turned to Harry, her voice taking on the pleading tone she'd used as a child when caught in mischief. "Dad, please. I'm trying to help you. I love you too much to watch you decline alone in this house." "If you love me," Harry said quietly, "you'll respect my decision to stay here. But the deposit at Sunset Manor will be refunded," Harry said firmly. "I spoke with my lawyer today." Patricia's face went pale. "Your lawyer?" "Robert Chen. He's very interested in reviewing the power of attorney documents you've been using to make decisions on my behalf." The silence that followed was heavy with implications. Patricia looked trapped, calculating, like someone trying to decide whether to confess or double down on a lie. "Dad, I was protecting your interests by committing me to a nursing home without my consent, by making sure you have proper care before something terrible happens." Tommy stepped forward. "Mum, what's this really about? Because from where I stand, it looks like you're trying to liquidate Grandpa's assets while he's still alive to sign the papers." Patricia's composure finally shattered completely. "You don't understand. Neither of you understand. I'm drowning here. The mortgage, the kids' expenses, Michael's worthless child support checks. I can't keep this up." There it was, the truth beneath all the concern about Harry's welfare. Patricia was in financial trouble and saw her father's estate as a solution. "So your answer is to steal from your own father?" Tommy asked. "It's not stealing. It's his money anyway. It'll all be mine when he dies. I'm just making sure it's managed properly while he's still alive." Harry felt his heart break a little. His daughter, the little girl he'd taught to ride a bicycle, whose scraped knees he'd bandaged, whose college education he'd proudly funded, was talking about his death like a business transaction. "Patricia," he said quietly, "sit down." She sat reluctantly on the porch steps, looking like a child caught in serious mischief. "How much trouble are you in?" Patricia's defenses crumbled, and she began to cry. "I'm going to lose the house, Dad. I'm 3 months behind on the mortgage, and Michael hasn't paid child support in 6 months. I can't ask the kids to move again. They've been through enough with the divorce." Harry felt the familiar tug of paternal protectiveness, even as he recognized the manipulation in Patricia's tears. "Why didn't you just ask for help?" "Because I'm 47 years old. I shouldn't need my father to bail me out of my financial problems." "But you should be able to steal his house." Patricia looked up at Tommy with tear-streaked cheeks. "I wasn't stealing anything. I was making sure Dad got proper care while preserving the family assets." "For yourself?" "For all of us. Do you think I wanted to put Dad in a nursing home? Do you think this was easy for me?" Harry studied his daughter's face, seeing the desperation and shame beneath her justifications. Patricia had always been proud, sometimes to a fault. The idea of asking for help would have been humiliating for her, while the idea of managing his assets would have felt like taking control rather than accepting charity. "Patricia," Harry said, "what would happen if I helped you with the mortgage, got you caught up on payments?" She looked up with desperate hope. "You'd do that?" "I might. But there would be conditions." "What conditions?" "First, you return any power of attorney documents and never attempt to gain control of my affairs again. Second, you cancel the Sunset Manor arrangement and get the deposit back. Third, you respect my decision to live in my own house as long as I'm capable." Now Patricia nodded eagerly. "Yes, of course. I never wanted to control your life, Dad. I just wanted you to be safe." "And fourth," Harry continued, "you get counseling. Financial counseling to learn how to manage money properly, and family counseling to work on why you thought this was an acceptable way to treat your father." Patricia's face flushed with anger. "I don't need counseling. I just need help getting back on my feet." "Then there's no deal." Tommy watched the exchange with fascination. His grandfather was showing the kind of firm but fair leadership that had made him a respected foreman in his construction days. Patricia struggled with her pride for several long moments before nodding reluctantly. "Fine, I'll do the counseling." "And one more thing," Harry added. "You'll work with Robert Chen to set up a legitimate power of attorney that only goes into effect if I'm medically incapacitated. Not because you think I'm too old to make my own decisions." "Agreed." Harry nodded slowly. "Then we'll meet with Robert tomorrow morning and work out the details." After Patricia left, Harry and Tommy sat in the gathering darkness, listening to the sounds of the neighborhood settling in for the night. "Think she'll actually follow through?" Tommy asked. "I think she'll try. Your mother's not a bad person, Tommy. She's just scared and desperate, and that makes people do things they wouldn't normally consider. You're being pretty generous, considering she tried to steal your house on your birthday." Harry chuckled dryly. "When you get to be my age, you learn that holding grudges takes more energy than you have to spare. Besides, she's still my daughter. And if she tries something like this again, then I'll be ready for her." Tommy smiled in the darkness. "You know, for an 80-year-old man, you're pretty scary when you want to be. I didn't survive 80 years by being a pushover." That night, Harry lay in the bed he'd shared with Dorothy for 53 years, thinking about the day's events. He'd been betrayed by his own daughter, but he'd also discovered reserves of strength and determination he'd thought were diminished by age. Tomorrow, he'd meet with Robert Chen and begin the process of protecting his independence while helping Patricia rebuild her life on honest terms. It wouldn't be easy, but it was the right thing to do. Outside his bedroom window, Portland slept peacefully under a canopy of stars. Inside his own house, his fortress, his sanctuary, his home, Harold Whitmore prepared for whatever challenges lay ahead. At 80 years old, he wasn't ready to surrender his dignity or his independence to anyone, family or otherwise. The fight for his autonomy had only just begun. Robert Chen's law office occupied the third floor of a renovated brick building in Portland's Pearl District, with large windows overlooking the city and mountains beyond. At 9 a.m. sharp, Harry arrived with Tommy, both men dressed in their best clothes, Harry in the navy suit he'd worn to Dorothy's funeral, Tommy in khakis and a button-down shirt that made him look more like a young professional than an electrician. Patricia was already there, seated across from Robert's desk, with a manila folder in her lap and an expression of barely controlled anxiety. She'd arrived early, Harry realized, probably hoping to set the narrative before he and Tommy appeared. "Good morning, Harry, Tommy," Robert said, rising to shake their hands. "Patricia and I have been discussing the situation." Harry settled into the chair next to his daughter, noting the careful distance she maintained. "What have you discussed?" Robert opened a file on his desk. "Patricia has provided the documents she claims give her power of attorney over your affairs. I've had a chance to review them." He spread 3 pages across the desk. Legal documents covered in small print with Harry's signature at the bottom of each page. "Do you remember signing these, Harry?" Harry put on his reading glasses and studied the papers carefully. The letterhead was from a legal clinic downtown, not Robert's office. The documents were dated 6 months after Dorothy's death, during the period when Harry had been struggling with grief and the overwhelming task of settling his wife's affairs. I remember Patricia taking me to see a lawyer about organizing my estate, Harry said slowly, but I thought we were just updating my will and making sure everything was in order. What do you remember about that meeting? Harry tried to recall the details. It was downtown, a small office. The lawyer seemed rushed, said Patricia had explained my situation and had prepared documents to simplify my affairs. I wasn't thinking clearly then. I was missing Dorothy, and all the legal language was confusing. Robert nodded sympathetically. These documents give Patricia broad authority over your financial affairs, medical decisions, and living arrangements. Did anyone explain the full scope of what you were signing? The lawyer said it was standard estate planning, protecting my interests in case something happened to me. Patricia shifted uncomfortably in her chair. Dad, you were so overwhelmed after Mom died. You couldn't handle the bills, the insurance paperwork, any of it. I was trying to help you organize your affairs before you made mistakes that would cost you money. But you didn't explain that I was signing away my right to make my own decisions. I explained that the documents would let me help you manage things if you needed assistance, Robert interjected carefully. Patricia, there's a significant difference between helping someone manage their affairs and having legal authority to override their decisions. I never overrode his decisions. I made suggestions based on what was best for his safety and well-being. Tommy spoke for the first time since arriving. You put him in a nursing home without his consent and used his money to pay for it. How is that not overriding his decisions? Patricia's face flushed. Sunset Manor is a quality facility that provides the care Dad needs, and I used his money because it's for his benefit. His benefit according to you, Tommy replied, not according to him. Robert raised a hand to forestall further argument. Let's focus on the legal issues. Harry, based on these documents, Patricia does have authority to make decisions on your behalf. However, there are several problems with how that authority was obtained and exercised. He pulled out a legal pad covered with notes. First, the documents were prepared by a clinic that specializes in quick, low-cost legal services. They have a reputation for not fully explaining the implications of what clients are signing. Second, they were signed during a period when you were grieving and potentially vulnerable to influence. Third, Patricia has used this authority to make decisions that appear to benefit her financially rather than serving your best interests. What does that mean for Dad's situation? Tommy asked. It means we have grounds to challenge the validity of these documents and Patricia's use of the authority they granted. Patricia leaned forward urgently. Robert, I never did anything to hurt Dad. Everything I did was to protect him and ensure he gets proper care. Patricia, Robert said gently, committing someone to a nursing home against their will and using their money to pay for it is not protection. It's elder abuse. The words hung in the air like an accusation. Patricia went pale, and Harry felt a chill at hearing his situation described in such stark terms. Elder abuse? Patricia whispered. Financial exploitation of an elderly person by a family member is a serious crime in Oregon. It carries both civil and criminal penalties. Patricia looked stricken. I wasn't trying to abuse anyone. I was trying to take care of my father. Then let's focus on finding a solution that actually serves Harry's interests, Robert said. Harry, what do you want to happen here? Harry had been thinking about this question since yesterday's confrontation. I want to revoke Patricia's power of attorney. I want to stay in my own house as long as I'm capable of caring for myself, and I want to help Patricia with her financial problems in a way that doesn't require me to give up my independence. Robert made notes as Harry spoke. That's all achievable. We can revoke the existing power of attorney and draft new documents that only go into effect if you're medically incapacitated, as determined by physicians rather than family members. What about Sunset Manor? Tommy asked. I'll contact them today to cancel the arrangement and request a refund of the deposit. Patricia looked panicked. But what if Dad does need care? What if something happens and he's alone? That's a valid concern, Robert acknowledged. Harry, have you considered what arrangements you'd want if you did become unable to care for yourself? Harry had been thinking about this for years, especially since Dorothy's death. I'd want to stay in my house as long as possible, with help coming to me rather than me going to an institution. If that becomes impossible, I'd want to choose my own care facility and have a say in the arrangements. That's completely reasonable and exactly what most people want, Robert said. We can set up advance directives that specify your preferences and ensure they're followed. How long will all this take? Harry asked. I can draft the revocation documents today. The new power of attorney and advance directives will take a few days. In the meantime, I'll send a cease and desist letter to Sunset Manor and any other parties who've been told Patricia has authority over your affairs. Patricia had been quiet during this exchange, looking increasingly distressed. Dad, what about my mortgage situation? You said you might help. Harry looked at his daughter, seeing the desperation in her eyes. Despite her betrayal, she was still his child, and her financial crisis was real. We'll discuss that separately, after the legal issues are resolved. But Dad, Patricia, Harry said firmly, you violated my trust in the worst possible way. Before we talk about me helping you, you need to prove that you understand what you did wrong and that you're committed to changing. Robert cleared his throat. If I may suggest, there are ways to provide financial assistance that protect both of your interests. We could set up a loan with formal terms, or a trust that provides help with specific expenses without giving Patricia access to Harry's principal assets. I don't want a loan from my father, Patricia said stiffly. That's humiliating. More humiliating than trying to steal his house? Tommy asked. Patricia shot her son a furious look. I wasn't stealing anything. You were taking control of assets that don't belong to you without the owner's informed consent. In what universe is that not stealing? Harry held up a hand to stop the argument. Patricia, Robert is right that there are ways I can help you that protect both of us. But first you need to accept responsibility for what you've done and commit to getting the counseling I mentioned yesterday. Patricia struggled visibly with her pride before nodding reluctantly. Fine. I'll look into counseling options. Not look into, schedule, this week. This week? Dad, I have to work and the kids have activities. Then you should have thought about that before you tried to commit me to a nursing home. The meeting continued for another hour, with Robert explaining the legal procedures and timeline for resolving Harry's situation. By the time they left his office, Harry felt a sense of cautious optimism. The law was on his side, he had competent representation, and Tommy's support gave him the strength to stand firm against Patricia's manipulations. As they walked to their cars, Patricia fell into step beside Harry. Dad, I know you're angry with me, but I really was trying to help. When I saw you struggling after Mom died, when Mrs. Patterson called about you being on that ladder, I got scared. I imagined you falling, or having a heart attack, or something happening and no one finding you for days. Harry could hear the genuine fear in her daughter's voice, and it softened his anger slightly. Patricia, your concerns about my safety aren't unreasonable, but the way you went about addressing them was completely wrong. I know that now. I panicked, I guess. Between my money problems and worrying about you, I made some really bad decisions. They reached Patricia's car, and she turned to face Harry with tears in her eyes. I'm sorry, Dad. I'm really, truly sorry. I never wanted to hurt you or take away your independence. I just wanted to know you were safe. Harry studied his daughter's face, seeing the woman who'd been his little girl, who'd called him from college when she was homesick, who'd asked him to walk her down the aisle at her wedding. Patricia had made terrible choices, but she wasn't evil, just scared and desperate and overwhelmed. "I believe you're sorry," Harry said. "But sorry isn't enough. You have to prove that you understand what you did wrong and that you won't do it again." "How can I prove that?" "By respecting my decisions, even when you disagree with them. By accepting help on my terms, not by trying to control my life, and by getting the counseling to figure out how you ended up thinking this was acceptable." Patricia nodded, wiping her eyes. "I'll do better, Dad. I promise." "We'll see." That afternoon, Harry and Tommy worked together in the garden, pulling weeds and preparing the rose beds for winter. It felt good to have companionship in the work Dorothy had loved, and Tommy's questions about plant care showed he was genuinely interested in maintaining the family traditions. "Grandpa," Tommy said as they worked, "what made you decide to fight back instead of just going along with Mom's plan?" Harry considered the question while deadheading the last of the season's roses. "I suppose it was thinking about your grandmother. Dorothy always said that dignity wasn't something other people could give you or take away. It was something you had to claim for yourself. Mom seems to think she was protecting you. Maybe she was in her own mind. But protection that requires me to give up everything that makes life worth living isn't protection, it's imprisonment." They worked in comfortable silence for a while, the October afternoon warm enough to make the physical labor pleasant. Harry noticed that his arthritis bothered him less when his mind was occupied with purpose rather than worry. "Tommy, can I ask you something?" "Of course." "Do you think I'm too old to be living alone? Am I being stubborn about something I should accept?" Tommy straightened up, considering his answer carefully. "Grandpa, when I was here last Christmas, you cooked a 5-course dinner for 8 people, fixed Mrs. Patterson's garbage disposal, and stayed up until midnight, helping me troubleshoot a wiring problem over the phone. Does that sound like someone who needs to be in assisted living? Your mother would say those are exceptions, that my overall capacity is declining. My mother is looking for reasons to justify what she wants to do anyway." Tommy's voice hardened. "She's been talking about your declining capacity since Grandma died, but every time I visit you seem as sharp as ever." "I do forget things sometimes. Jenny's birthday, where I put my glasses, appointments." "Grandpa, I'm 23 and I forget things all the time. Forgetting isn't a sign of incompetence, it's a sign of being human." Harry smiled at his grandson's fierce loyalty. "What if I do start declining? What if there comes a time when I can't live safely alone? Then we'll deal with it when it happens, but we'll deal with it honestly, with your input and your consent, not by tricking you into signing papers or forcing you into situations you don't want." That evening, Robert Chen called with an update. "Harry, I've spoken with Sunset Manor. They're willing to refund the deposit since you never signed the admission papers yourself. They're also concerned about Patricia's representation of your mental state and her authority to make decisions on your behalf." "What does that mean?" "It means they're taking this seriously. They don't want to be accused of participating in elder abuse, so they're cooperating fully with cancelling the arrangement." "And the power of attorney documents?" "I've drafted a formal revocation. Once you sign it, and we file it with the appropriate offices, Patricia will have no legal authority over your affairs. I've also prepared new documents that give you much more control over if and when someone else can make decisions for you." "How long before this is all resolved?" "By the end of the week, assuming Patricia doesn't try to fight the revocation." "Would she do that?" Robert paused. "It's possible. Especially if she's as desperate financially as she claims. Fighting the revocation would buy her time to try other approaches to gaining access to your assets." Harry felt a chill. What kind of other approaches? "She could try to have you declared mentally incompetent, which would give her guardianship rights. She could claim you're being manipulated by Tommy or myself. She could even try to argue that you're a danger to yourself, and need protective custody. But those claims would be false. Truth and legal proceedings don't always align perfectly, especially in elder law cases. The courts are very concerned about protecting elderly people from exploitation, but sometimes that protection gets turned against the elderly person's own wishes. What can I do to protect myself? Document everything. Keep records of your daily activities, medical appointments, financial transactions. Have regular check-ins with your doctor to establish your mental competency. And most importantly, don't give Patricia any ammunition she could use against you. After hanging up, Harry shared the conversation with Tommy, who looked increasingly concerned. So basically, Mom could still try to screw you over even after the power of attorney is revoked. It's possible. What kind of ammunition could she use? Harry thought about Mrs. Patterson's phone calls, about the minor mistakes and forgotten appointments Patricia had catalogued. Anything that could be interpreted as evidence of declining capacity or unsafe living conditions. Like what? Forgetting appointments, accidents around the house, medication errors, social isolation. Tommy was quiet for a moment. Grandpa, what if we made sure none of those things could be used against you? How? What if I moved back to Portland? Got a job here, found an apartment nearby. I could check on you regularly, help with maintenance around the house, be a witness to your competency and independence. Harry felt a surge of gratitude mixed with concern. Tommy, I can't ask you to uproot your life because of my problems with your mother. You're not asking. I'm offering. And honestly, I've been thinking about moving back anyway. Seattle's expensive, and I miss being closer to family. What about your job? I'm an electrician, Grandpa. I can get work anywhere. And Portland's construction market is booming. I'd probably make more money here than in Seattle. Harry considered the offer. Having Tommy nearby would certainly provide companionship and support, and it would make it much harder for Patricia to claim he was isolated or unsafe. Are you sure about this? I'm sure. Besides, you're going to need someone to help you fight Mom if she tries anything else. Family protects family, remember? The next morning brought an unexpected visitor. Harry was having his morning coffee on the porch when a silver sedan pulled into his driveway. A woman in her 50s emerged, dressed in a business suit and carrying a briefcase. Mr. Whitmore, I'm Dr. Susan Bradley from Adult Protective Services. I've received a report expressing concern about your welfare. Harry's blood ran cold. What kind of report? A family member contacted us expressing concerns about your mental capacity and living situation. They indicated you might be in danger living alone. Harry set down his coffee cup carefully. I assume that family member was my daughter, Patricia. I can't discuss the source of the report, but I am required to investigate any allegations of self-neglect or unsafe living conditions. I see. What does this investigation involve? I'd like to tour your home, assess your living conditions, and ask some questions about your daily routine and support systems. Harry realized this was exactly what Robert had warned him about, Patricia's next move in her campaign to gain control of his life. Dr. Bradley, I'd like to call my lawyer before we proceed. Her expression tightened slightly. Mr. Whitmore, this is a standard welfare check. There's no need for lawyers unless you have something to hide. What I have to hide is my constitutional right to privacy and due process. I'm calling my lawyer. Harry went inside and called Robert Chen, explaining the situation, while Dr. Bradley waited on his porch. Robert's response was immediate and reassuring. Don't answer any questions or allow any search of your home without me present. I'll be there in 30 minutes. When Harry returned to the porch, Dr. Bradley looked annoyed. Mr. Whitmore, your refusal to cooperate raises additional concerns about your judgment and mental state. My refusal to surrender my rights without representation demonstrates exactly the opposite. Tommy's pickup truck pulled into the driveway, and Harry felt a wave of relief. His grandson, emerged from the cab wearing work clothes and carrying a toolbox. "Morning, Grandpa. Who's your visitor?" "Dr. Bradley from Adult Protective Services. She's here to investigate a report about my welfare." Tommy's face darkened. "What kind of report?" "Concerns about his mental capacity and living situation," Dr. Bradley said, studying Tommy with obvious interest. "Are you a family member?" "I'm his grandson. And you're here because my mother filed a false report, aren't you?" "I can't discuss the source of reports, but I can tell you that family members are often the first to notice when an elderly person needs intervention. Or when they want to justify stealing that person's assets," Tommy said bluntly. Dr. Bradley's expression turned disapproving. "Young man, these are serious allegations. Elder abuse is a significant problem, and family members who try to prevent proper intervention can face legal consequences themselves." Harry realized that Dr. Bradley saw Tommy as a potential threat, a young relative who might be manipulating an elderly man for his own benefit. "Dr. Bradley," Harry said carefully, "my grandson lives in Seattle and visits occasionally. He has no access to my finances and no stake in my living arrangements, except wanting me to be happy and safe. Nevertheless, I'll need to speak with him as part of my investigation." Robert Chen's sedan pulled up behind Tommy's truck, and Harry felt his shoulders relax. Robert emerged from his car, carrying his own briefcase, and wearing an expression of professional determination. "Dr. Bradley," Robert said as he approached the porch. "I'm Robert Chen, Mr. Whitmore's attorney. I understand you're here to investigate an APS report." "That's correct. Though I have to say the fact that Mr. Whitmore immediately called a lawyer raises additional concerns about his situation. Actually, it demonstrates exactly the kind of good judgment and self-advocacy skills that prove he doesn't need protective intervention," Robert replied smoothly. "Shall we discuss the parameters of your investigation?" For the next hour, Robert negotiated the terms of Dr. Bradley's visit while Harry and Tommy waited in the living room. Finally, Robert returned with Dr. Bradley and a formal-looking document. "Mr. Whitmore, we've agreed that Dr. Bradley can conduct a brief tour of your home and ask questions about your daily routine. However, you have the right to refuse to answer any questions you find intrusive, and I'll be present throughout the process." The tour that followed felt like a hostile inspection. Dr. Bradley examined Harry's kitchen for food safety, his bathroom for signs of personal hygiene problems, his bedroom for evidence of medication management issues. She asked probing questions about his daily routine, his social contacts, his financial management, and his relationship with family members. Harry answered each question carefully, aware that anything he said could be used to justify intervention he didn't want. Dr. Bradley took notes on everything, her expression growing more frustrated as it became clear that Harry was competent, well cared for, and living safely. "Mr. Whitmore," she finally said, "your home appears to be well maintained and your personal care seems adequate. However, I am concerned about your social isolation and your apparent conflict with family members who are trying to help you." "What kind of conflict?" Robert asked. The family member who filed the report indicated that Mr. Whitmore has become hostile and suspicious toward people trying to provide assistance. This can be a sign of paranoia or cognitive decline. "Or," Robert said dryly, "it can be a sign that the assistance being offered isn't actually in Mr. Whitmore's best interests." "Oh, what do you mean?" Robert opened his briefcase and pulled out copies of the power of attorney documents. "The family member who filed this report recently attempted to commit Mr. Whitmore to a nursing home against his will and use his assets to pay for it. Under these circumstances, suspicion and hostility seem like entirely appropriate responses." Dr. Bradley's expression shifted as she reviewed the documents. These appear to give the family member legitimate authority obtained through questionable means during a period of grief and vulnerability. We're in the process of revoking them and investigating whether they constitute financial elder abuse." "I see." Dr. Bradley closed her notebook and looked at Harry with a different expression, less condescending, more respectful. "Mr. Whitmore, based on my assessment, I don't see evidence of self-neglect or unsafe living conditions. You appear to be managing your affairs competently and living independently." "Thank you. However, I will be filing a report noting the family conflict and recommending follow-up contact in 6 months to ensure your situation remains stable." After Dr. Bradley left, Harry slumped in his recliner, emotionally exhausted by the morning's ordeal. "Well," Robert said, "that could have been much worse. She was clearly expecting to find evidence of neglect or incompetence, and when she didn't, she had no grounds for intervention. But she'll be back in 6 months, possibly, but by then we'll have the legal situation resolved and a clear record of your competency and independent living skills." Tommy was pacing the living room, his anger evident. "I can't believe Mom called APS on her own father. That's incredibly low, even for her." "She's desperate," Harry said tiredly. "Desperate people do desperate things. That doesn't excuse it." "No, it doesn't. But understanding why someone does something terrible doesn't mean you have to let them keep doing it." Robert packed his papers away and stood to leave. "Harry, I think it would be wise to document today's events and any future contact from Patricia or other agencies. Keep a journal of your daily activities, maintain regular contact with your doctor, and don't give anyone ammunition to use against you." "What kind of ammunition?" "Anything that could be interpreted as evidence of declining capacity. Take your medications on schedule, keep your house clean, maintain your social connections, stay physically active. Live your life, but live it visibly and competently." After Robert left, Harry sat on his porch with Tommy, watching the neighborhood go about its afternoon routine. Children walked home from school. Neighbors worked in their yards. Mrs. Patterson peered suspiciously over her fence. "You know what the worst part of this is?" Harry said. "What?" "Patricia's made me second-guess myself. Every time I forget something or make a mistake, I wonder if she's right about my declining capacity." "That's exactly what she wants," Tommy said angrily. "She wants you to doubt yourself so you'll be easier to control." "Maybe. Or maybe she genuinely believes I need protection." "Grandpa, you just successfully defended yourself against a false APS report. You hired a lawyer, protected your rights, and proved your competency to a trained investigator. Does that sound like someone who needs to be in a nursing home?" Harry smiled for the first time all day. "When you put it that way, no. So stop second-guessing yourself. You're 80 years old, not dead. You have every right to live your life on your own terms." That evening, Harry called Patricia. She answered on the first ring, her voice tense with anxiety. "Dad, how did the APS visit go?" Harry felt a surge of anger at her transparent attempt to seem uninvolved. "You know exactly how it went, since you're the one who called them." Silence. "Patricia?" "Dad, I was worried about you living alone after what happened with the lawyer and Tommy getting involved. I thought maybe you were being pressured or manipulated." "The only person who's pressured and manipulated me is you." "That's not fair. I was trying to protect you by filing a false report with Adult Protective Services, by trying to have me declared incompetent." "I never tried to have you declared incompetent. What did you think would happen if APS found evidence of self-neglect or unsafe living? They would have petitioned the court for guardianship, with you as the likely guardian." Patricia was quiet for a long moment. "Dad, I'm scared for you. I'm scared something will happen and I won't be able to live with myself for not doing everything I could to protect you." Harry heard the genuine fear in his daughter's voice, but he also heard the manipulation. the way she made her fear his responsibility to manage. "Patricia, your fear doesn't give you the right to control my life. If you're worried about my safety, there are ways to address that without taking away my independence." "Like what?" "Like having honest conversations about my needs and preferences, like respecting my decisions even when you disagree with them, like finding ways to support me that don't require me to give up everything that makes life worth living." "I don't know how to do that, Dad. I see you living alone in that big house, and all I can think about is everything that could go wrong." Harry sighed. "Patricia, I can't live my life based on everything that could go wrong. And I can't let your anxiety dictate my choices. So what happens now? Now you prove that you're serious about changing. You get the counseling I asked for, you respect the legal boundaries Robert is setting up, and you find ways to be my daughter instead of my guardian. And if I do all that, you'll still help me with my financial problems?" Harry considered the question. "We'll discuss it after you've shown that you understand what you did wrong and that you're committed to doing better." How long will that take?" "As long as it takes." After he hung up, Harry realized that this conversation felt different from previous ones with Patricia. For the first time in years, he'd maintained control of the interaction instead of being swept along by her emotional manipulation. It felt good to stand firm on his own terms. Tommy appeared in the doorway with 2 bottles of beer. "How did that go?" "Better than expected. I think she's starting to understand that her old tactics won't work anymore. Think she'll actually follow through with the counseling. I think she'll try, at least until she figures out whether I'm serious about helping with her mortgage." They sat in comfortable silence, watching the sun set over Portland's western hills. Harry felt a sense of cautious optimism about the future. The legal situation was being resolved. Patricia's manipulations had been exposed and defeated, and Tommy's presence gave him both practical support and emotional strength. "Tommy," Harry said, "are you really serious about moving back to Portland?" "Already started looking for apartments online. There's a place about 10 minutes from here that allows dogs." "Dogs?" Tommy grinned. "I've been thinking about getting a dog. Someone to keep me company and maybe help keep an eye on my favorite grandfather." Harry laughed, feeling lighter than he had in months. "Your favorite grandfather?" "My only grandfather, but also my favorite." As night fell over the house Harry had built with his own hands, he felt grateful for the unexpected turns his 80th birthday had taken. He'd been betrayed by his daughter, but defended by his grandson. He'd discovered legal protections he didn't know existed, and reserves of strength he'd thought were lost to age. Most importantly, he'd proven, to Patricia, to Adult Protective Services, and to himself, that 80 years old didn't mean helpless, and that dignity was worth fighting for at any age. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, but tonight, Harold Whitmore was master of his own domain, surrounded by family who respected his choices and prepared to face whatever came next on his own terms. 2 weeks after the APS visit, Harry was beginning to think the worst was behind him. Robert had successfully revoked Patricia's power of attorney and filed new documents that protected Harry's autonomy while providing for future care decisions only if medically necessary. Tommy had found an apartment in the Hawthorne district and was interviewing for electrical jobs. Patricia had grudgingly scheduled an appointment with a family counselor, though she complained constantly about the expense and inconvenience. Then Harry received the letter. It arrived on a grey November morning, delivered by certified mail in an envelope bearing the letterhead of Morrison, Baker and Associates, attorneys at law. Harry signed for it with growing unease, recognizing that Patricia's maiden name was Morrison. Inside was a formal legal document that made Harry's blood run cold: petition for guardianship and conservatorship. In the matter of Harold James Whitmore, an alleged incapacitated person. Harry read the petition twice before the full implications sank in. Patricia, represented by what was apparently a family law firm run by her ex-husband's relatives, was asking the court to declare him mentally incompetent and grant her guardianship over both his person and his property. The document was filled with legal language, but the core allegations were clear. Harry was suffering from dementia, was unable to care for himself safely, was being manipulated by his grandson and lawyer, and required immediate protective intervention to prevent financial exploitation and physical harm. Supporting this petition was a 10-page affidavit signed by Patricia, detailing every mistake Harry had made in the past 2 years, every forgotten appointment, every moment of confusion or physical difficulty. She'd been documenting his alleged decline systematically, building a case for incompetency while pretending to be a concerned daughter. Harry sank into his recliner, the legal papers scattered across his lap. If Patricia succeeded with this petition, he would lose everything: his house, his independence, his right to make any decisions about his own life. She would become his legal guardian with authority to commit him to any facility she chose and control every aspect of his existence. With shaking hands, Harry called Robert Chen. "Robert, I need to see you immediately. Patricia's filed a guardianship petition." Robert's voice turned grim. "I'll clear my schedule." "Can you be here in an hour?" Harry's second call was to Tommy, who was at a job interview in southeast Portland. "Grandpa, what's wrong? You sound terrible." "Your mother is trying to have me declared incompetent. She's filed court papers asking for guardianship." "She what?" Tommy's voice turned dangerous. "I'll be right there." "No, finish your interview. Meet me at Robert's office at 11. Grandpa, this is more important than any job interview." "The job interview is exactly why this is important. If your mother succeeds, you'll need employment to support yourself, because there won't be any inheritance left to worry about." Robert's office felt different this time, not like a friendly consultation, but like a war room. Robert had spread the guardianship petition across his conference table and was making notes on a legal pad while Harry and Tommy read through Patricia's allegations. "This is incredibly detailed," Robert said grimly. "She's been building this case for months, maybe years." Harry read through Patricia's affidavit, feeling each allegation like a physical blow. Subject frequently forgets appointments and becomes confused about dates and times. Subject was observed climbing on a ladder despite his age and physical limitations. Subject has become paranoid and suspicious toward family members attempting to provide assistance. Subject's grandson has moved nearby and appears to be exercising undue influence over Subject's decisions. Subject refuses to acknowledge his declining capacity and becomes agitated when presented with evidence of his limitations. "Half of this is lies," Tommy said angrily, "and the other half is normal aging, taken completely out of context." "That's the problem with guardianship cases," Robert explained. "The standard of evidence is relatively low, and petitioners can frame normal human behavior as evidence of incapacity." "What do we need to prove Harry's competence?" Tommy asked. Robert consulted his notes. "The court will evaluate 4 areas: ability to make informed decisions about personal care, ability to manage financial affairs, ability to communicate decisions, and ability to understand the consequences of those decisions." "I can do all of those things," Harry said. "I know you can. But we need to prove it objectively, and we need to counter Patricia's narrative that you're being manipulated by Tommy and myself." "How do we do that?" "First, we get you evaluated by a geriatric psychiatrist who can assess your mental capacity professionally. Second, we document your daily activities and decision-making abilities. Third, we gather character witnesses who can testify to your competence and independence." Harry felt overwhelmed by the scope of what they were facing. "How long do we have?" The hearing is scheduled for December 15th. That gives us about 3 weeks to prepare. What happens if Patricia wins? Robert's expression was grave. She becomes your legal guardian with authority over where you live, what medical care you receive, how your money is spent, and who you're allowed to see. Essentially, you would have the same legal rights as a child. The words hit Harry like a physical blow. At 80 years old, after a lifetime of independence and responsibility, he could be reduced to the legal status of a minor child, dependent on his daughter's goodwill for every aspect of his existence. There's something else, Robert continued. Patricia's petition includes a request for emergency temporary guardianship, claiming you're in immediate danger. What does that mean? If the judge grants it, Patricia could gain temporary authority over your affairs while the case is pending. She could move you to a care facility immediately and take control of your finances. Tommy stood up abruptly, his face flushed with anger. This is insane. Mom is basically trying to kidnap her own father. Legally, yes, and the emergency hearing is scheduled for this Friday. Harry felt the walls closing in around him. In 4 days, Patricia could succeed in taking control of his life while he waited weeks for a chance to prove his competence. What can we do to prevent the emergency guardianship? We need to show the court that you're not in immediate danger and that Patricia's petition is motivated by financial gain rather than genuine concern for your welfare. How do we prove that? Robert opened another file. I've been investigating Patricia's financial situation and the law firm representing her. Morrison, Baker and Associates is run by her ex-husband's brother, and they specialize in elder law cases that involve substantial assets. You think they're targeting Dad specifically because he has money? Tommy asked. I think Patricia told them about Harry's assets, and they see this as a lucrative guardianship case. If they succeed, they'll bill the estate for their legal fees, which in a case like this could run into hundreds of thousands of dollars. Harry felt sick. So this isn't just about Patricia wanting control, it's about lawyers wanting to profit from my estate. That's my suspicion, and if we can prove it, it will seriously undermine their case. Robert assigned homework for the next 3 days. Harry needed to schedule an evaluation with Dr. Margaret Foster, a geriatric psychiatrist who specialized in competency assessments. Tommy needed to gather character witnesses who could testify to Harry's independence and decision-making abilities. Robert would investigate the financial motivations behind Patricia's petition and prepare legal arguments against emergency guardianship. That afternoon, Harry called Dr. Foster's office and scheduled an emergency evaluation for Thursday morning. The receptionist was sympathetic when Harry explained the urgency of his situation. Dr. Foster sees a lot of cases like this, she said. She understands how stressful guardianship proceedings can be. Harry's next task was more difficult, calling friends and neighbors to ask them to testify on his behalf. The conversations were embarrassing and awkward, requiring him to explain that his own daughter was trying to have him declared incompetent. His first call was to Bill Henderson, his neighbor for 20 years and a fellow retired carpenter. "Harry, that's outrageous," Bill said after hearing the situation. "You're one of the sharpest guys I know. Just last month you helped me figure out that wiring problem in my basement. Would you be willing to testify to that in court?" "Absolutely. Patricia's got some nerve trying to pull this stunt." Similar conversations with other neighbors, church members, and old work colleagues gradually built a network of character witnesses. Harry was touched by their unanimous support and their outrage at Patricia's actions. Mrs. Patterson was the exception. "Harold, I have to be honest," she said, when Harry called to ask for her support. "I have noticed some changes in you since Dorothy died. The ladder incident really concerned me, and sometimes I see you wandering around your yard looking confused." Harry felt a chill. Confused about what? Well, Last week I saw you standing in your garden for a long time just staring at the roses, and you've been talking to yourself more often. Harry realized that Mrs. Patterson had been interpreting his grief and contemplation as signs of mental decline. "Eleanor, I was thinking about Dorothy when I looked at her roses, and I talk to myself because I live alone, and sometimes it helps me think through problems." "I understand, Harold, but from the outside it can look concerning." Harry hung up, knowing that Mrs. Patterson would probably testify for Patricia if asked. Her well-meaning concerns could be presented as objective evidence of his declining capacity. Tommy arrived that evening with takeout dinner and a list of people he'd contacted. "I talked to your doctor, your banker, the guy who runs the hardware store, and about 6 of your former co-workers," Tommy reported. "They all think this guardianship thing is ridiculous, and they're all willing to testify. What did Dr. Martinez say?" "He said your last physical was normal for someone your age. Your blood pressure is well controlled, and your cognitive function seemed fine during your appointments. He's going to write a letter documenting your medical competence." Harry felt a surge of gratitude for his grandson's efficiency and support. "What about your job interviews?" "Got 3 offers. Portland's electrical market is even better than I thought." Tommy grinned. "I can start Monday at whichever company I choose." "That's wonderful news. The best part is, all 3 companies said they'd give me time off for court appearances if needed. When I explained what was happening, they were all sympathetic." Wednesday brought an unexpected development. Robert called with news that changed everything about their strategy. "Harry, I've been investigating Morrison, Baker and Associates, and I found something interesting. They've filed 12 guardianship petitions in the past 2 years, all targeting elderly people with substantial assets, and all involving family members who claim to be protecting their relatives." "What happened in those cases?" 10 resulted in guardianships being granted. In every case, the law firm billed the estate for extensive legal fees, the elderly person was moved to expensive care facilities, and the family member who filed the petition gained control of valuable assets. "That sounds like a pattern." "It is a pattern, and there's more. 3 of those cases are being investigated by the State Bar Association for potential elder abuse and fraudulent billing practices." Harry felt a glimmer of hope. "Does that help our case?" "It helps tremendously. It shows that Patricia is part of a systematic scheme to exploit elderly people through fraudulent guardianship proceedings." "But we still have to prove I'm competent." "Yes, but now we can also argue that Patricia's petition is part of a pattern of elder abuse rather than legitimate concern for your welfare." Thursday's evaluation with Dr. Foster lasted 3 hours and covered every aspect of Harry's mental and emotional functioning. She tested his memory, reasoning ability, decision-making capacity, and understanding of his situation. She asked about his daily routines, his relationships, his financial management, and his plans for the future. "Mr. Whitmore," Dr. Foster said as they concluded, "based on this evaluation, I see no evidence of cognitive impairment or diminished capacity. You demonstrate excellent insight into your situation, appropriate judgment about your care needs, and full understanding of the legal proceedings you're facing. What about the mistakes my daughter documented? The forgotten appointments and moments of confusion?" "Normal aging involves some changes in memory and processing speed, but that doesn't constitute incapacity. The incidents your daughter described fall well within the range of normal functioning for someone your age. Will you testify to that in court?" "I'll provide a written report documenting my findings, and I'm prepared to testify if needed." Harry left Dr. Foster's office feeling more confident about his case, but still anxious about Friday's emergency hearing. Everything depended on convincing a judge that Patricia's claims were false and financially motivated. Thursday evening, Tommy made an observation that crystallized their strategy. "Grandpa, I've been thinking about something. If Mom really believed you were incompetent and in danger, why didn't she try to help you before she tried to control you?" "What do you mean?" "I mean, if she was genuinely concerned about your safety, she could have offered to hire a housekeeper or arrange for meal delivery or set up a medical alert system. Instead, her first and only solution was to take complete control of your life and your money." Harry realized Tommy was right. Patricia had never offered supportive assistance that would preserve his independence. Her only suggestions had involved removing him from his home and gaining control of his assets. "That's a really good point," Harry said. "A genuinely concerned daughter would try to help me stay independent, not take away my independence." "Exactly, and that's what we need to emphasize in court, that Mom's actions show financial motivation, not genuine concern." The Friday morning arrived grey and rainy, matching Harry's mood as he prepared for the emergency guardianship hearing. He dressed carefully in his best suit, determined to present himself as competent and dignified despite the circumstances. Robert met them at the courthouse, carrying a briefcase full of documents and wearing an expression of grim determination. "How are you feeling, Harry?" "Scared," Harry admitted, "but ready to fight." "Good. Remember, this is just the emergency hearing. We only need to convince the judge that you're not in immediate danger and that the full hearing should proceed as scheduled." The courtroom was smaller than Harry had expected, with wood-paneled walls and fluorescent lighting that made everyone look pale and tired. Patricia was already there with her lawyer, a man in his 40s with an expensive suit and an air of predatory confidence. Judge Elizabeth Thornton was a woman in her 60s, with grey hair and sharp eyes that suggested she'd seen every kind of family manipulation imaginable. She reviewed the case files while the lawyers prepared their arguments. "This is a petition for emergency temporary guardianship," Judge Thornton began. "Councillor Morrison, please present your argument for why immediate intervention is necessary." Patricia's lawyer stood up with theatrical gravity. "Your Honour, Harold Whitmore is an 80-year-old man who's suffering from progressive dementia and is being exploited by family members who have gained undue influence over his decision-making. He is living alone in unsafe conditions, making poor financial decisions and refusing necessary medical care." Harry listened to the familiar allegations, now presented as urgent facts requiring immediate judicial intervention. "Furthermore," Morrison continued, "Mr. Whitmore has recently revoked legitimate power of attorney documents that were protecting his interests, apparently under pressure from his grandson and a lawyer who may be taking advantage of his diminished capacity." The implication was clear. Robert and Tommy were opportunistic predators, manipulating a confused old man for their own benefit. "Your Honour," Robert stood up when Morrison finished, "everything you just heard is false. Mr. Whitmore is mentally competent, living independently, and making rational decisions about his own care. This petition is not about protecting Mr. Whitmore. It's about gaining control of his substantial assets." Robert presented Dr. Foster's evaluation, character witness statements, and evidence of Patricia's financial problems. He explained the pattern of fraudulent guardianship cases involving Morrison, Baker, and Associates. "Your Honour, if the petitioner were genuinely concerned about Mr. Whitmore's welfare, she would have offered supportive services to help him remain independent. Instead, her only solution involves taking complete control of his life and his money. That's not protection, that's exploitation." Judge Thornton asked Harry to stand and address the court directly. "Mr. Whitmore, do you understand the nature of these proceedings?" "Yes, Your Honour. My daughter is asking you to declare me mentally incompetent so she can control my life and my property. Do you believe you need a guardian? No, Your Honor. I live independently, manage my own affairs, and make my own decisions. I may be 80 years old, but I'm not helpless or incompetent. What is your understanding of your daughter's concerns? Harry chose his words carefully. Your Honor, my daughter is facing serious financial problems, and I believe she sees my assets as a solution. She's convinced herself that taking control of my life is the same as helping me, but her actions show she's more concerned with gaining access to my property than protecting my welfare. Judge Thornton asked several more questions, testing Harry's understanding of his finances, his living situation, and his relationship with Tommy. Harry answered each question clearly and thoughtfully, demonstrating the kind of reasoning ability that contradicted claims of dementia or incapacity. Mr. Whitmore, the judge said finally, you present as a competent individual who understands your situation and is capable of making informed decisions about your care. Harry felt a surge of hope. However, Judge Thornton continued, these are serious allegations that require thorough investigation. I'm going to deny the petition for emergency guardianship, but I'm ordering a complete assessment by the court's guardian ad litem before the full hearing. Robert leaned over and whispered, that's good news. No emergency guardianship means you keep control of your affairs while we prepare for the main hearing. Patricia looked stricken as Judge Thornton explained the timeline for the full guardianship hearing and the appointment of a guardian ad litem, an independent advocate who would investigate Harry's situation and make recommendations to the court. Outside the courthouse, Patricia approached Harry with tears in her eyes. Dad, I know you think I'm trying to hurt you, but I'm really not. I'm scared something will happen to you, and I'll never forgive myself for not doing everything I could to protect you. Harry looked at his daughter, seeing the genuine fear mixed with desperate self-justification. Patricia, if you were really trying to protect me, you would have asked what kind of help I wanted instead of deciding what kind of control you needed. I don't know how to help you in ways you'll accept. Then maybe that's something you should explore in counseling. Patricia's lawyer interrupted the conversation. Mrs. Morrison, we need to discuss strategy for the main hearing. As they walked away, Harry heard Morrison telling Patricia, don't worry, we'll present a stronger case next time. The judge was obviously influenced by his performance today, but when we get expert witnesses to testify about his condition. Tommy overheard too and looked furious. They're already planning their next attack. Let them plan, Harry said firmly. We'll be ready. Over the next 3 weeks, Harry threw himself into preparing for the guardianship hearing with the same methodical determination he'd once brought to construction projects. He documented his daily activities, maintained a journal of his decision-making processes, and submitted to additional medical and psychological evaluations. The court-appointed guardian ad litem, Sandra Walsh, conducted her own investigation. She spent hours with Harry, reviewing his living situation, his financial management, his social connections, and his understanding of his own needs. She interviewed Tommy, Robert, Dr. Foster, and Harry's friends and neighbors. She also interviewed Patricia, who doubled down on her claims that Harry was being manipulated and exploited by people who didn't truly care about his welfare. Ms. Walsh, Patricia said during her interview, my father has always been stubborn and prideful. He's not going to admit he needs help, even when it's obvious to everyone else. My grandmother was the same way. She refused assistance until she fell and broke her hip, and then it was too late to prevent the damage. Patricia's strategy was becoming clear. Frame Harry's independence as dangerous stubbornness and his refusal to accept her control as evidence of impaired judgment. But Patricia made a critical mistake during her interview with Ms. Walsh. When asked about alternatives to guardianship, Patricia dismissed every suggestion. We tried getting him a housekeeper, but he said he didn't need one. We suggested a medical alert system, but he claimed it was unnecessary. I offered to hire someone to help with yard work, but he insisted on doing it himself. Ms. Walsh's report noted that Patricia had never actually offered any of these services. She was claiming credit for suggestions she'd never made. The Guardian ad litem's investigation also uncovered evidence that Patricia had been systematically documenting Harry's alleged decline while simultaneously creating situations that made him appear confused or incompetent. Mr. Whitmore, Mrs. Walsh explained during one of their meetings, "Your daughter has been calling you to change appointment times at the last minute, then documenting when you showed up at the originally scheduled time as evidence of confusion. She's been asking you complex financial questions during stressful family conversations, then noting when you couldn't immediately recall specific details." Harry felt a chill of recognition. "She's been setting me up to fail." It appears so. This kind of systematic documentation suggests premeditation rather than genuine concern. Tommy's investigation into Patricia's finances revealed additional troubling information. She'd been living beyond her means for years, using credit cards to maintain her lifestyle and counting on inheritance money to solve her problems. "Grandpa, I found something interesting," Tommy said one evening as they reviewed their case preparation. "Mom applied for a home equity loan 6 months ago and was denied because her debt-to-income ratio was too high. What does that mean?" "It means she was already planning to use your assets to solve her financial problems before she filed the guardianship petition." Robert compiled this information into a comprehensive counter-narrative. Patricia was a financially desperate woman who had convinced herself that taking control of her father's assets was justified by manufactured concerns about his competence. The night before the hearing, Harry sat on his front porch with Tommy, watching his neighborhood settle into evening routines. Children played in yards while parents prepared dinner. Elderly couples walked dogs. Normal people living normal lives without court battles over their basic human rights. "Nervous?" Tommy asked. "Terrified," Harry admitted, "but also angry. At my age, I shouldn't have to prove to strangers that I'm competent to live my own life." "You shouldn't have to, but tomorrow you'll prove it anyway, and then this nightmare will be over." Harry hoped his grandson was right, but he knew that Patricia's desperation made her unpredictable. Even if she lost the guardianship case, she might try other approaches to gain control of his assets. "Tommy, what if she tries something else after this?" "Then we'll deal with it. You're not fighting this alone, Grandpa." The final hearing was scheduled for 9 a.m. on a cold December morning. Harry arrived at the courthouse feeling prepared but anxious, knowing that the next few hours would determine whether he retained the independence he'd fought so hard to preserve. Judge Thornton's courtroom was packed with witnesses, lawyers, and court officials. Patricia sat with her legal team, looking haggard and desperate. Harry noticed that her ex-husband's brother, the head of Morrison, Baker and Associates, was present, unusual for a family law case unless significant money was involved. "This is the final hearing on the petition for guardianship and conservatorship," Judge Thornton announced. "I have reviewed the Guardian ad litem's report, the medical evaluations, and all submitted evidence. Councillor Morrison, you may present your case." What followed was a systematic attempt to destroy Harry's credibility and independence. Patricia's lawyers called witnesses who testified about Harry's alleged confusion, his supposed safety risks, and his apparent vulnerability to manipulation. Mrs. Patterson took the stand to describe Harry's concerning behavior, standing in his garden, talking to himself, climbing ladders despite his age. A hired geriatric specialist testified that people Harry's age commonly suffered from cognitive decline that they themselves couldn't recognize, making them vulnerable to exploitation by younger family members seeking financial gain. Patricia herself testified tearfully about her father's deterioration since her mother's death. his increasing isolation and suspicious behavior, and her fears that he was being manipulated by people who didn't truly love him. "Your Honor," Patricia said, dabbing her eyes with a tissue, "I love my father more than anything in this world. I don't want to control his life. I want to save it. He's not safe living alone, and he's not capable of recognizing the people who are taking advantage of him." Harry listened to his daughter's testimony with a mixture of sadness and anger. Patricia had convinced herself that her version of events was true, that her financial desperation was really protective love. When Robert's turn came to present Harry's defense, he methodically dismantled Patricia's narrative. Dr. Foster testified about Harry's normal cognitive function and his clear understanding of his situation. Character witnesses described his independence, competence, and active involvement in his community. Tommy testified about his grandfather's daily routines and decision-making abilities. Ms. Walsh's report documented Patricia's systematic campaign to create evidence of Harry's incompetence while never offering genuine assistance that would preserve his independence. "Your Honor," Robert concluded, "this case is not about protecting an incompetent elderly man. It's about a financially desperate daughter trying to gain control of her father's assets by manufacturing evidence of incapacity. Mr. Whitmore is competent, independent, and capable of making his own decisions about his care and his property." Finally, Judge Thornton called Harry to testify on his own behalf. "Mr. Whitmore, you've heard your daughter's concerns about your safety and capacity. How do you respond?" Harry stood up slowly, feeling the weight of 80 years and the eyes of everyone in the courtroom. "Your Honor, I understand that my daughter loves me and wants me to be safe. But safety that requires me to give up everything that makes life worth living isn't safety, it's imprisonment." He spoke for 20 minutes about his daily life, his decision-making processes, his understanding of his own limitations, and his plans for addressing future care needs if they became necessary. "I'm not asking this court to pretend I'm 20 years old," Harry concluded. "I'm asking for the right to live my remaining years with dignity, independence, and control over my own choices. That's not too much to ask at any age." Judge Thornton recessed for 2 hours to review the evidence and testimony. Harry waited in the courthouse cafeteria with Tommy and Robert, too nervous to eat but grateful for their support. When court reconvened, Judge Thornton delivered her verdict with the kind of clarity that left no room for appeal. "After reviewing all evidence and testimony, I find that Mr. Harold Whitmore is mentally competent and capable of managing his own affairs. The petition for guardianship and conservatorship is denied." Harry felt his knees weaken with relief. "Furthermore," Judge Thornton continued, "I am concerned about evidence suggesting that this petition was motivated by financial considerations rather than genuine welfare concerns. I am referring this matter to the State Bar Association for investigation of potential elder abuse and fraudulent legal practices." Patricia broke down in tears, and her lawyers quickly gathered their papers and hustled her out of the courtroom. The threat of professional sanctions had ended their interest in pursuing further appeals. Outside the courthouse, Harry stood in the cold December air, feeling like he could breathe freely for the first time in months. "It's over," Tommy said, embracing his grandfather. "You won." "We won," Harry corrected. "I couldn't have done this alone." Robert shook Harry's hand with genuine warmth. "Harry, I've been practicing law for 20 years, and I've never seen anyone fight harder for their independence. You should be proud." That evening, Harry sat on his front porch despite the cold, watching his neighborhood and marveling at how normal everything looked. Children still played in yards, neighbors still walked dogs. His world had been turned upside down by legal battles and family betrayal, but somehow life continued in all its ordinary beauty. Tommy joined him with 2 cups of hot coffee and a blanket for Harry's shoulders. "So what happens now?" Tommy asked. "Now I live my life," Harry said simply. "I maintain my house, tend my garden, enjoy my independence, and try to rebuild some kind of relationship with your mother." "You really think that's possible after everything she did?" Harry considered the question. "I don't know, but she's still my daughter, and you're still her son. Family relationships are complicated, but they're worth trying to preserve when possible. What if she tries something like this again? Then I'll be ready for her. But I hope she learned something from this experience about the difference between helping someone and controlling them." Dougie, as they sat in comfortable silence, Harry realized that his 80th birthday surprise had ultimately been a gift, though not the kind Patricia had intended. He'd discovered reserves of strength and determination he'd thought were lost to age. He'd learned that dignity was worth fighting for at any stage of life, and he'd proven that family loyalty worked both ways. Sometimes you had to protect yourself from those who claimed to be protecting you. Most importantly, he'd shown that 80 years old didn't mean helpless, and that independence was a right worth defending no matter how many birthdays you'd celebrated. Harold Whitmore had entered his 9th decade with a victory that proved age was just a number and that the will to remain free never expires. 6 months after the guardianship hearing, Harry was building a chicken coop in his backyard. At 80 years old, he decided that fresh eggs and a new project would add purpose to his days. The irony wasn't lost on him. Patricia had tried to have him declared incompetent, and now he was learning carpentry techniques he'd never attempted in 60 years of construction work. Tommy, who had indeed moved back to Portland and found an excellent job with a sustainable energy company, was helping with the electrical wiring for the coop's lighting system. "Grandpa, I have to ask, why chickens?" Harry straightened up from nailing together the nesting boxes, his arthritis bothering him less than it had in years. "Dorothy always wanted chickens, said fresh eggs would taste better than store-bought, and she liked the idea of caring for something that would care for us in return." "So this is for Grandma?" "This is for both of us. She would have loved watching them in the yard, and I like the idea of having living creatures to tend. Besides, Mrs. Patterson's been complaining about raccoons in the neighborhood. Chickens will give them something to worry about besides my ladder usage." Tommy laughed. "How is Mrs. Patterson treating you these days?" "Better, actually. After the court case, I think she realized that her helpful observations weren't actually helping anyone. She's been more respectful of my privacy." They worked in comfortable silence for a while, Harry marveling at how much his life had improved since winning his independence. The legal victory had given him more than just the right to live in his own house. It had restored his confidence in his own judgment and decision-making abilities. "Tommy," Harry said as they measured wire for the chicken run, "I need to tell you something. I've decided to sell the house." Tommy stopped working and stared at his grandfather. "What? Why? I thought you fought so hard to stay here. I fought for the right to make my own choices about where to live. Now I'm choosing to move somewhere that makes more sense for this stage of my life." Harry had been thinking about this decision for months. The house was too large for his needs. The yard required more maintenance than he wanted to manage, and the property values in his neighborhood had increased dramatically. Selling would give him enough money to buy a smaller place and ensure his financial security for the rest of his life. "Where are you thinking of moving?" "I found a senior community in Bend. Not assisted living, independent condominiums for people over 65. Smaller spaces, less maintenance, but full ownership and control over my living situation." Tommy looked concerned. "Are you sure this isn't what Mum wanted all along? You moving to some kind of senior housing?" Harry smiled at his grandson's protective instincts. "Tommy, there's a huge difference between choosing to move to a community that fits my needs and being forced into institutional care against my will. This place has workshops, gardens, a library, and neighbors who chose to be there rather than being committed by their families. When would you move? This fall, after the chickens are established and the garden is ready for winter. I want to complete this project first, prove to myself that I can still take on new challenges. That afternoon, Harry received an unexpected phone call. Patricia's voice was tentative, uncertain. "Dad, I hope it's okay that I'm calling." "It's fine, Patricia. How are you doing?" "Better, actually. I've been going to counseling, like you asked, and I think it's helping me understand some things about myself." Harry felt cautiously optimistic. "What kind of things?" "Why I thought controlling your life was the same as protecting you. Why I couldn't just ask for help with my financial problems. Why I was so afraid of everything that could go wrong instead of focusing on what was going right." "And what have you learned?" Patricia was quiet for a moment. "I learned that my anxiety about losing you made me do exactly the things that pushed you away. And I learned that my financial problems were my responsibility to solve, not your burden to carry." Harry appreciated the honesty in his daughter's voice. "How are your finances now?" "Getting better. I took a second job teaching night classes, and I'm working with a debt counselor to get my spending under control. It's hard, but it feels good to take responsibility for my own problems." "I'm proud of you for that. Dad, there's something else. I want to apologize for everything I put you through, not just the legal case, but years of treating you like you couldn't make your own decisions. I was wrong, and I'm sorry." Harry felt a weight lift from his shoulders. "I accept your apology, Patricia, and I want you to know that I understand you were scared and overwhelmed. That doesn't excuse what you did, but it helps me understand why you did it. Is there any chance we could try again, have a relationship that's based on respect instead of me trying to manage your life?" "I'd like that very much." They talked for another 30 minutes, tentatively rebuilding the foundation of their relationship. Patricia asked about Harry's projects and daily routine without offering suggestions for improvement. Harry asked about his grandchildren without lecturing Patricia about her parenting choices. "Dad," Patricia said as they prepared to hang up, "Tommy told me you're thinking about moving to Bend." Harry tensed, expecting criticism or manipulation. "I think that sounds like a wonderful choice. Independent living in a community of peers, beautiful scenery, and you'd be close enough that we could visit regularly without me worrying about your daily safety." Harry was surprised by Patricia's supportive response. "You're not concerned about me making such a major decision?" "Dad, you've proven you're capable of making excellent decisions about your own life. I trust your judgment." After they hung up, Harry sat on his porch thinking about the conversation. Patricia sounded genuinely different, more humble, more respectful, more focused on understanding rather than controlling. The counseling appeared to be working. Tommy arrived for dinner that evening with groceries and news about his job. "The company wants to send me to a conference in Denver next month, Sustainable Energy Systems for Residential Construction. I told them I'd need to check with my grandfather's schedule first." Harry laughed. "Tommy, you don't need to structure your life around taking care of me. I know I don't need to. I want to. Besides, someone has to keep an eye on your chicken coop construction project." Over dinner, Harry told Tommy about his conversation with Patricia. "Think she's really changed?" Tommy asked. "I think she's trying to change. Whether she succeeds long-term remains to be seen, but the effort matters." "Are you going to help her financially now that she's in counseling?" Harry had been considering this question for weeks. "I'm going to offer her a loan for her mortgage arrears with clear terms and repayment schedule. Not a gift, but assistance that preserves both of our dignity." "That's generous of you." "It's practical. I can afford to help. She needs the help, and a formal loan protects both of our interests." A week later, Harry met Patricia at a coffee shop downtown to discuss the loan arrangement. She brought financial documents showing her debt situation and her progress in counseling, treating the meeting like a business transaction rather than a family manipulation. "Dad, I want you to know that I'm not asking for this money. If you want to offer it, I'll accept it gratefully and repay it according to whatever terms you set, but I'm not expecting it." Harry reviewed Patricia's financial information, noting her efforts to reduce expenses and increase income. "I'm willing to loan you $15,000 to catch up your mortgage payments," he said. "5-year repayment term at 3% interest, with automatic withdrawal from your checking account each month." Patricia's eyes filled with tears. "Thank you, Dad. This will give me the breathing room I need to get completely back on my feet. The loan comes with one condition." "What's that?" "You continue with counseling for at least another 6 months. I want to see evidence that you're committed to changing the patterns that got you into this situation." "I agree to that completely." They signed the loan documents that afternoon, with Robert Chen serving as witness and legal advisor. It felt good to Harry to help his daughter while maintaining appropriate boundaries and protections. As summer progressed, Harry's chicken coop neared completion. He'd ordered 6 hens from a local farm, breeds known for egg production and gentle temperaments. The project had become a neighborhood attraction, with children stopping by to watch the construction and neighbors offering advice about chicken care. "Mr. Whitmore," said Janet from across the street, "my grandmother always said chickens were better than dogs for alerting you to strangers in the yard." "I hadn't thought of that benefit," Harry replied, "though I'm hoping they'll be quiet enough not to bother the neighbors." "Oh, don't worry about that. After everything you've been through with your family situation, I think everyone supports whatever makes you happy." Harry realized that his legal battle had actually strengthened his relationships with neighbors, who now saw him as someone who'd successfully defended his independence rather than an elderly man who might need management. In August, Harry received a visit from Dr. Foster, who wanted to check on his well-being after the traumatic guardianship proceedings. "Mr. Whitmore, how are you feeling about everything that happened?" "Relieved that it's over, grateful for the people who supported me, and proud that I stood up for my rights." "Any lingering anxiety about your relationship with your daughter?" "Some. But Patricia seems genuinely committed to changing, and our conversations have been much more respectful recently." Dr. Foster noted Harry's improved mood and energy levels. "You seem to be thriving. The chicken project is interesting. It shows forward thinking and commitment to the future." "That's exactly how I see it. At my age, starting a new project sends a message that I believe in my own future." "What about your plans to move to Bend? How do you feel about leaving this house?" Harry looked around his living room, filled with 60 years of memories and mementos. "Sad, but not regretful. This house served its purpose for Dorothy and me, and for raising our family. But I'm ready for a new chapter that fits my current life better." That's a very healthy perspective. In September, Harry's chickens arrived. 6 beautiful hens, Rhode Island Reds and Buff Orpingtons, who settled quickly into their new home. Harry found unexpected joy in their daily care routines and the fresh eggs they provided. Tommy visited most evenings to help with chicken care and garden maintenance. "Grandpa, I have to admit, I was skeptical about the chicken project. But you seem happier than I've seen you in years. Having a purpose helps. These hens depend on me for food, water, and protection. It feels good to be needed by something again. Speaking of being needed, I have news. Sarah and I are getting serious." Harry smiled. Sarah was Tommy's girlfriend, a teacher he'd met at a coffee shop in the Hawthorne district. "How serious?" "Ring shopping serious. I wanted to ask your permission before I propose." Harry felt a surge of joy and pride. "Tommy, you don't need my permission, but you have my blessing. Sarah's a wonderful woman. She wants to meet you properly, Maybe dinner this weekend? I'd love that. The dinner was a success, with Sarah charming Harry with her genuine interest in his chicken project and her stories about teaching middle school students. She treated him like a respected elder rather than a fragile elderly person, asking his advice about classroom management and home maintenance projects. Mr. Whitmore, Sarah said as they finished dessert, Tommy's told me so much about your legal battle. I teach civics, and I'd love to have you speak to my students about standing up for your rights. Harry was touched by the invitation. I'd be honored to do that. After Sarah and Tommy left, Harry reflected on how much his life had changed since his 80th birthday. He'd faced the ultimate betrayal from his own daughter, fought successfully for his independence, rebuilt his relationship with Patricia on healthier terms, and gained a future granddaughter-in-law who valued his wisdom and experience. October brought the first serious frost, time to prepare the garden for winter and finalize plans for his move to Bend. Harry had found a perfect condominium in a community called Cascade Heights, 2 bedrooms, a small patio perfect for container gardening, and a shared workshop where residents could pursue woodworking and other crafts. Patricia helped with the packing, carefully wrapping Dorothy's china and organizing family photographs. Their relationship had indeed improved, based now on mutual respect rather than Patricia's attempts to control. Dad, Patricia said as they packed books from his study, I want you to know how much I admire your decision to move to Bend. It takes courage to start over at 80. It takes courage to start over at any age, Harry replied, thinking of Patricia's own efforts to rebuild her financial life. But sometimes starting over is the only way to move forward. Tommy and Sarah announced their engagement in November, with wedding plans for the following spring. They wanted to have the ceremony at Harry's new place in Bend, with the mountains as a backdrop. Are you sure you want to have a wedding at an old man's condominium? Harry asked. Grandpa, Tommy said seriously, you're not just an old man. You're the man who taught me that fighting for what's right is always worth it, no matter what the odds. Having our wedding at your place would honor everything you've shown me about courage and independence. Harry's eyes misted with tears. Then I'd be honored to host your wedding. The move to Bend went smoothly, with Tommy and Sarah helping to transport Harry's belongings and settle him into his new home. The condominium was perfect, manageable size, beautiful views, and neighbors who had also chosen this lifestyle rather than being forced into it. How does it feel? Tommy asked as they unpacked the last boxes. Like coming home to a place I've never been, Harry said. Different, but right. Harry's first winter in Bend was everything he'd hoped for. The community was active and engaged, with residents who ranged from their 60s to their 90s, all maintaining their independence while enjoying the security of a supportive environment. He joined the woodworking group, where his skills as a carpenter made him a valuable mentor to other residents learning the craft. He started a small garden plot in the community greenhouse, growing herbs and vegetables year-round. Most importantly, he felt respected and valued by his neighbors, who saw him as Harold Whitmore, carpenter, chicken farmer, legal warrior, rather than as an elderly man who might need supervision. Patricia visited monthly, bringing Jenny and Mike to see their grandfather in his new environment. The visits were pleasant and relaxed, with Patricia showing genuine interest in Harry's activities and friends, rather than concerns about his capacity or safety. Dad, Patricia said during a February visit, I owe you another apology. For what? For all the years I treated your aging like a disease that needed to be managed, rather than a natural part of life that deserved respect. Harry nodded. That means a lot to me, Patricia. I see how happy you are here, how active and engaged with your community. This is what I should have wanted for you all along, a life that fits your needs and honors your choices. In March, Harry received a letter from the Oregon State Bar Association. Morrison, Baker and Associates had been sanctioned for unethical practices in elder law cases, with several attorneys facing suspension or disbarment. 3 criminal cases had been filed for elder abuse and fraud. Harry felt vindicated, but not vengeful. His victory had apparently helped protect other elderly people from similar exploitation. Tommy and Sarah's wedding in May was everything Harry had hoped it would be. 40 guests gathered on the patio of his condominium, with the Cascade Mountains providing a stunning backdrop. Harry walked Sarah down the aisle in the absence of her father, who had died several years earlier. "I'm proud to stand in for your dad," Harry told Sarah before the ceremony. "He would have been so happy to see you marrying someone as good as Tommy." The wedding reception was held in the community center, with Harry's neighbors joining the celebration. Patricia gave a toast that brought tears to Harry's eyes. "Dad, a year ago I thought I knew what was best for you. I was wrong about almost everything. But you taught me that wisdom isn't about age. It's about respecting people's right to live their lives with dignity and independence. Thank you for fighting for that right, and thank you for showing all of us what real strength looks like." Dream. As the evening wound down, Harry sat on his patio with Tommy and Sarah, watching the stars appear over the mountains. "Grandpa," Tommy said, "I have a confession to make. When I first heard Mom was trying to put you in a nursing home, I thought maybe she was right. Maybe you were too old to live alone safely." Harry was surprised by this admission. "What changed your mind?" "Watching you fight back. Seeing how competent and determined you were when your independence was threatened. I realized that age is just a number. What matters is your spirit and your ability to stand up for yourself. And now," Tommy smiled, "now I hope I'm half as strong and independent as you are when I'm 80. Sarah raised her glass. "To Grandpa Harry, the man who proved that courage doesn't decline with age." As they toasted under the starlit sky, Harry reflected on the journey that had brought him to this moment. His 80th birthday had indeed marked a new beginning, though not the one Patricia had planned. He'd learned that independence wasn't something other people could grant or take away. It was something you had to claim and defend for yourself. He discovered that family love sometimes required setting boundaries rather than accepting control. Most importantly, he'd proven that dignity and self-determination were worth fighting for at any age. At 81, Harold Whitmore was living proof that the best chapters of life might be yet to come, as long as you retained the courage to write them yourself. The chickens were thriving in their temporary coop, and Harry was already planning to build a new one in the community garden. Some projects, like some victories, were worth repeating. Life, Harry had learned, was not about the number of years you accumulated, but about what you did with the time you had left. And Harold Whitmore intended to make every remaining day count, on his own terms, surrounded by people who respected his choices and celebrated his independence. The old carpenter had built one final structure, a foundation of dignity that would support him for whatever time remained, strong enough to withstand any storm, and beautiful enough to inspire others who might one day face similar battles for their own autonomy. At 81, Harry Whitmore was not just surviving, he was thriving, and he had the fresh eggs to prove it.